Markus has, if I'm not mistaken, a PhD in quantum gravity and works for the Max Planck Institute of Astronomy, but his true nature is in managing the Haus Astronomy, which is like if you want to feel like a child in front of a sweet shop, it's what happens when you visit the Haus der Astronomie. It's such an amazing place with amazing people and extraordinary activities for teachers that are willing to innovate in teaching astronomy. So if you have the opportunity to go to Heidelberg and visit the site, I strongly advise you to do so. It's really an incredible place. He's also the NOC for Germany for the IAU outreach activities. But recently he assumed the role of director of the Office of Astronomy for Education, which is another IAU initiative, a very important one. And we're still watching the warm-up of the Office of Astronomy for Education. And I think I will speak no more, and I'll let Markus present to us this amazing new activity and the opportunities that this will bring to us. Markus, thank you very much for accepting to be a keynote today, and the floor is yours. I will let you know when you're reaching the end of your time and help you with the questions that will for sure arise.
So thank you, Rosa. The respect is mutual, of course. There was a Global Hands-on Universe conference before in Munich a long time ago, and it's a really amazing initiative. It's also an initiative that has a long tradition and can look back onto lots of different successes. What I'm going to talk about now, in contrary, is something that's just about to get started. So we are somewhat more modest about this for obvious reasons. All right, so I believe that if you could not see my screen, then somebody would probably scream.
We are seeing your site, your screen.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so thank you for this honor and opportunity of presenting our little new office, the Office of Astronomy for Education, in this illustrious setting. So since we have a great number of attendants from a number of different backgrounds, I ask for your understanding that I start a little bit more generally. So let's start with International Astronomical Union, which is of course the organization and the new office. Most of you will be familiar with it, but for those who don't, it's kind of the umbrella organization for professional astronomers. The main role is to define astronomy whatever that is needed. So when it comes to naming celestial bodies, when it comes to coordinate conventions, when it comes to units and definitions. So the astronomical unit is one that was redefined comparatively recently. All of these things, when you really need the consensus of the astronomical community to lay down something, those are typically the resolutions at the general assemblies of the International Astronomical Union. So, and all of you are familiar with the more infamous example, namely the redefinition of what is a planet and why Pluto is not one. That, of course, is part of that also, and it is within the rights of the International Astronomical Union to do so. The other main task of the IAU is to organize scientific meetings. So I've already mentioned the General Assemblies, where literally thousands of astronomers converge in non-COVID times, one should say, to a location to really exchange news and new results in all areas of astronomy. All a sibling of those are the IAU symposia, which are a little bit more limited in scope, but also international and well attended. So if you will, those were the main goals of the International Astronomical Union until about 10 years ago. During that time, there was an effort, and if I want to associate a single name with it, it would be that of George Miley from Leiden, who a number of you will know, to become more active in those areas that are within the IAU's mission, namely in supporting development, supporting the training of young astronomers, supporting communication in terms of outreach, and also support education. So this was a longer process that really started with astronomy for development and has now led to the creation of our office as well. So at this moment, the IAU defines its mission as follows. The mission of the IAU is to promote and safeguard astronomy in all its aspects, and then it takes care to add explicitly, including research, communication, education, there we are, and development through international cooperation. All right, let's talk a little bit about the structure there. The IAU, how does the IAU do this? How does it promote it? And safely, as with all scientific organization, it's really a matter of volunteer contributions from scientists. So we have on the left side here a whole structure of self-organization of astronomers. We also have the IAU Executive Committee, the President, Evine van Diesweg, National Secretary, currently Teresa Lago. But this is really the core. Those are the scientists who are organizing themselves to 9 divisions, 35 commissions. These are all, of course, topical. So we'll come to the examples that interest us most shortly. And whenever there's something to be done, this is usually everything. These divisions or commissions are both form working groups where really astronomers come together to solve a particular problem, to organize a particular task. The ones that are of course of particular interest to us is Division C. Current president is Susanna de Stua, Education, Outreach and Heritage. And there we're mostly interested in Commission C1, which is Astronomy, Education and Development, currently led by Paolo Bretones. And the current working groups include competitions, which a number of you will know, education, research and methods, resources, mostly exemplified by the AstroEDU portal that a number of you will know, and NASA as the National Astronomy School Education Network. So this is the scientific self-organizing side of astronomy. And what has grown over the past decade is this side where the IAU has said for particular tasks, we need more resources than a purely volunteer association can give. We need to establish more permanent structures. And the Office of Astronomy for Development, currently led by Kevin Govender in South Africa, is the oldest of these. The Panas from the Office for Astronomy Outreach is going to give a talk later on. The Office for Young Astronomers with their summer school has been around for a long time. And this is, if you will, the newest edition, the Office of Astronomy for Education, which only exists since January of this year. So there, if you will, the IAU has taken the areas where it wants to be particularly active in a sustainable way and has created permanent structures. So what is our office meant to do? Again, here in the mission statement, there's the education,
Markus,
safeguarding of astronomy. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt just a little bit. It seems that your connection is a little bit unstable. Maybe you can turn off your camera to save some bandwidth, and this might improve the communication.
All right.
Thank you.
I hope it does.
It's in the bottom part of Zoom. You have an icon with a camera. You just click on it.
Yeah,
and
not when I'm sharing my screen. It's now in the top part, but yeah.
Ah, there is. Okay, you managed it. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So what the IAU has done in order to foster, in order to follow this mission, is to define specific goals in a strategic plan. And the goal that we are interested in is the IAU stimulates the use of astronomy for teaching, and education at school level. Now, of course, the fundamental question is which actions in this area are appropriate for the IAU to take on an international level. And I'm subsidiarity basically says do not do at a higher level what you can do at a lower level. And it's very clear that the main protagonists in astronomy education are the teachers, the astronomers who are really on location, who are teaching, who are interacting with the students. And it is also clear that the only thing that a higher level institution can do should be those tasks that only a higher level institution can do, namely to support those who are at the cold phase of education, if you will. So the categories of OAE activities that I'm going to talk about a little bit are as follows, and they are formulated with this particular goal in mind, namely with the goal, what can the Office of Astronomy Education reasonably do in this very rich landscape of institutions, of individual actors that are already working in astronomy education. And so what we sought out were the higher level goals, such as creating and maintaining infrastructure. I'm going to show you examples for everything in the next slides. To foster professionalization, networking, of course, to create, to curate, to disseminate basic education resources, to help to include more astronomy in curricula, and also to establish standards, since that again is very close to what the IAU is meant to do, establish a community consensus, establish standards for astronomy education, disseminate best practices. And again, it's very clear that the only reasonable way to do this is in close interaction with the astronomy education community. We do not want to reinvent wheels for obvious reasons. And there are so many helpful and so many great initiatives already out there. And Global Hands-on Universe, or GTP, are of course the ones that come to mind most readily at this particular conference. So this is really about the Office of Astronomy for Education, looking for its particular niche for supporting astronomy education in on a level that is appropriate for this particular new institution. So the first issue is the one of infrastructure. This is about publication venues for astronomy education materials. It's also about databases for finding such materials. And in one respect, astronomy education is lagging behind astronomy research as far as finding resources and also publication venues for resources are concerned. So if you look at research astronomers currently, then they usually start their day by looking at AstroPH on the archive. And that is such a broad convention that everybody knows that what is important will be on there. That is just a phenomenal infrastructure for research content, if you will. And also it's clear that if you're looking for something particular in a database, then you use the NASA ADS database, where everybody finds everything that they need to know, both in terms of current astronomical research articles and also a large collection of past articles. Sometimes they are only accessible in NASA ADS. So astronomy education, there the resources are much more dispersed. And of course, a number of institutions have created their own collections of fabulous resources. And of course, if you're connected to something like Global Hands-on Universe, you'll also have access to particular resources. But in general, when it comes to the resources that, say, a teacher in India or a teacher in Nicaragua develops, then apart from the language barrier, you're not going to find those resources, however good they are, if you're just casually looking around with an interest in astronomy education. So what we do specifically in this area is, first of all, we support the Astro EDU portal. And I hope that most of you will know this portal. It's a peer-reviewed activity portal for astronomy. And what we've been providing since January is editorial assistance. They have considerable backlog that we're currently working on. The second question for when it comes to databases is astronomers look in ADS. So we're in negotiations with the ADS team about listing educational resources in the database as well, and currently talking about the best ways of doing so. There's a wider problem, and that is if we take evaluation seriously, and I was glad that this topic of evaluation has already been has already come up, in particular in the previous talk. If we take this seriously, then we need a good and common review culture. So we need a broad pool of people who would be willing to review astronomy education resources, and we would also need standards and the knowledge of what is a good review. And those of you who have published technical articles will mostly know what a bad review is, one that is not constructive, that it does not help. So what we need for astronomy education is really a constructive review culture that allows us to evaluate resources without the sometimes, let's say, adversarial character that peer review has in astronomy research. And ideally, it would be great if we had something as widely accepted as arXiv, where everybody would regularly look for resources, but specifically for astronomy education. And that's a problem that we have not yet solved, that is very much on our minds. Then comes the question of professionalization. So let's start with teachers. There, of course, that is an issue that a number of other organizations are also addressing. How can we provide resources, simple astronomy for astronomy teaching with little strain? It's the Office of Astronomy for Development. Then we are also in the process of developing our own virtual school formats, schools for astronomy education, both international in English and regional in regional languages, starting as a low threshold introduction for those who are just starting in including astronomy education and astronomy topics in their teaching. Right now, we are of course planning for virtual such formats. Eventually, we hope to also have face-to-face training, of course, again, always in coordination with the existing formats, and GTTP on NAS and NAEC are, of course, the ones that are best known also within the IAU context. And then at some point, there will also come the time where we will start a process of defining community standards for resources and trainings. And again, that is something that the IAU is particularly suitable for. And that is, of course, something that we will not do single-handedly, but where we really need to achieve a community consensus of what level of evaluation is something that a resource or a teacher training format should have, and how can we ensure quality control by implementing those standards. Then there's another side to professionalization, namely one that also includes the astronomers in addition to the astronomy educators. This is to help teachers, to help educators keep up with developments in astronomy education research. That is something to disseminate to the community, to keep up with modern teaching methods, to keep up with evaluation techniques, and also, of course, to keep up with astronomy-specific topics, such as use of remote telescopes, which, of course, is something that is very central to the current conference, but also common topics like daytime observations, the use of authentic data, and also topics like including indigenous astronomy. So the question, of course, is what are the suitable tools to do that? And the specific resource is what is called OAE reviews. And the idea or the rationale behind this is that it's really hard to keep up with all the new developments if you're at the same time teaching, developing your own materials. So we take a leaf out of the book of astronomy researchers, and that is that in those fields there will occasionally be review articles which are meant to really take the literature, to condense the literature and to make it more readily accessible to all of those who are doing research on that topic or in a related topic. So what we want to create are OAE reviews that are meant to be minimally time consuming for getting up to speed on a given topic. Of course, again, not reinventing wheels, so we will rely a lot on existing resources, really try to provide a compact review, point to those existing resources, make sure that good resources are more widely received, that those in the field are aware of those resources. The current plan for doing so is that those OAE reviews are developed by experts from the community with specific OAE support. So each review is meant to have a review board that accompanies the review process, and it's meant to be a transparent process, a living document, if you will, with all the material that is being gathered available online during the creation, also with a feedback period from the community, and of course also with the review updated when such an update is needed. So to make this a little bit more concrete, let me share some of the topics that we have planned for our reviews. In the beginning, the general and methodological aspects are going to be a little bit more prominent. So what has been very important to the IAU in establishing the Office of Astronomy for Education was how to evaluate resources and activities. So again, this quest for community standards, for making sure that we are not just teaching into the blue or providing resources or training into the blue, but really evaluate our activities. So that is something where, at least as a research astronomer, you are not usually taught how to evaluate your resources and activities, your educational activities in this way. So this is something where a compact review can certainly make a difference. Then, of course, there's the big topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in astronomy education, where again, there's a huge body of knowledge, of experience, of best practices, and where again, really everybody who is active in astronomy education should be aware of the best practices and implement them in their own teaching. Something that has come to the fore for all of us, and where I think a number of us have gone through a very steep learning curve already, of course, are the online formats for astronomy education. So that is a specific topic, and there's going to be a mix of best practice reports. So in an OAE review, you would have reviews both of the research literature, but also, since we can always learn from each other's example, and of course the next days of this conference are going to be a very good demonstration of this. Is always good to know what the others are doing in a specific field, in a specific way, what works for them. So this was the more general question, and there are of course more specific content topics like again, remote observing, astronomy education with authentic data, and of course best practices or resources reviews for common topics such as cosmology, always a big favorite, or planetary atmospheres, given how big a problem climate change is, or how big a challenge climate change is for us. So that is the kind of OAE review that we're currently starting to create with help from the community of IAU experts and beyond. Then there's the question of fundamental astronomy resources. And since you've heard me reiterate that we do not want to reinvent the wheels, of course, the first task is there is a lot of education resources already out there. So it's not so much, I mean, creating is going to be one of the processes, but it's also a question of curating those resources, of evaluating them and disseminating to make sure that our eventual common goal, which I believe all of us share, is that teachers and educators should have universal access to high quality open educational resources when it comes to astronomy. Now, this is a big task, and of course we are starting with something specific, since you have to start your work somewhere, and our specific actions are, first of all, as all of you know, for teaching, but not for astronomy research, but for teaching, it is necessary to have resources in the local language. There's already the Astronomy Translation Network established by the Office of Astronomy Outreach, but that is something that we want to really tackle the task of taking materials for a number of subjects with a certain eye towards completeness, and also with a certain eye towards the most spoken languages in the world, of which there are surprisingly many. So this is really a task to tackle, and with more resources than we currently have. And we're currently starting very specifically by supporting such translations by creating a peer-review multilingual astronomy glossary, just to start with. We have lots of input from the big ideas in astronomy, which is a really helpful project when it comes to the systematic questions of what should fundamental astronomy resources include. So if you have not seen the big ideas in astronomy yet, I encourage you to look them up. It's an attempt to define astronomical literacy in terms of a number of big ideas and their sub-ideas. So we've been working closely with that group and are going to support the future development of the big ideas as well. But that's sort of one of the core systematic documents that you can build a systematic collection of fundamental astronomy resources about. One thing that came up very directly from having this multilingual astronomy glossary was the question, so do we have corresponding images and or animations for all those basic astronomical terms, those basic astronomical topics? And if we do, are they available under a free license so that really anybody can use them? So for most purposes, that would mean under Creative Commons license. And then the next step is, so where will people commonly look for information about astronomical topics? And we all know that, at least from a certain level on, Wikipedia is the go-to resource to that. So we're also planning to take a look at Wikipedia astronomy content. And there is such a thing as a Wikipedia editathon, which is basically a group of people coming together for a systematic improvement of Wikipedia in a certain framework. In our case, there would be astronomy. So that is also a way of strengthening a resource that is already out there and making sure that the place where most people are looking is also a place that has good quality answers that are really helpful in an astronomy education context. A more ambitious midterm goal is fostering astronomy in curricula on a national, state, or regional level. And of course, this is not narrowly about teaching astronomy. We all know that astronomy is a really great resource in the general context of teaching STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, since astronomy is what students find interesting from the get-go, and that can be leveraged to teaching them about science in general. And our goal there is to support studies on student interest and motivation. A number of you are going to be familiar with the ROSE study, Relevance of Science Education, which had the gratifying results, gratifying for astronomers, that among more than 100 topics that were given to students to indicate their particular interest in this scientific question, the one that won hands down in an international setting was really the question for life outside the Earth, that we all know how appealing a topic that is from our own astronomy teaching. And there is a planned successor called ROSES, which is going to build on that earlier study. And our plan was initially to support them by having the kickoff meeting at Haus der Astronomie. That hasn't, of course, worked because of COVID-19. But this is something that we remain very interested in. And then there's the question of creating resources about, I mean, most of us would not initially know what to do if we went after the goal of supporting efforts to include more astronomy in our national or regional curricula. So, but that is something that there's, of course, a lot of information on. So again, creating a resource that gives you compact, up-to-date, that is a compact way of getting up to date in a certain topic. That's again something that we want to that we want to provide in the shape of one of our OAE reviews. And then, of course, the key to getting to the national curriculum makers in our case are going to be what we call the National Astronomy Education coordinators, or the NAEC teams. With the national efforts, I'm going to tell a little bit more about the NAECs in a minute or so. Then, of course, there's always the networking aspect, and we've been very fortunate in that the other offices, notably the Office of Astronomy for Development and the Office of Astronomy Outreach, have been very welcoming to the new member of the IAU office family. It is also planned that at the next IAU General Assembly, there will be an OAE session that will allow us to network with the IAU astronomy community at large. We are also going to have an annual workshop called the Shaw IAU Workshop on Astronomy Education. The next one, which of course is going to be virtual, is from 6th to 9th October 2020. That is, if you will, our internal format of meeting those who work on similar topics, who work on the topics that the Office of Astronomy for Education is pursuing. And then, of course, when it comes to networking, you're welcome to follow us on social media. I have our Twitter handle here, and we're also Astro4Edu on Facebook. And here you also have our website for more information. We also have something as old-fashioned but effective, like a mailing list. You're welcome to subscribe to that too. And of course, a talk like this one, and that's why I'm particularly grateful for this invitation, because this is really a community that we are, of course, very interested in. Is also a way for us to connect with the astronomy education community. So, given that I've described all these rather ambitious projects, which, like all projects, are going to be a lot of work, who will be doing that work? And at the core of this is, of course, the Office of Astronomy Education at Haus der Astronomie Heidelberg. The Office of Astronomy Education was a proposal process. There was a call by the IAU for hosts for this new office, and Haus der Astronomie Heidelberg submitted a proposal that in the end won the IAU approval. So this is fixed, this is set. The Office of Astronomy Education in its core is at Haus der Astronomie Heidelberg. And we have additional structures that I'm going to talk about on the next slides: OAE centers and OAE nodes, which are institutional support institutions. I've already mentioned the network of National Astronomy Education coordinators. And of course, on numerous occasions, an important part is going to be played by collaborators of different roles. I've mentioned the OAE review board members, so the scientists who help us in creating the OAE reviews. And all of this started off in Paris last December. This is Teresa Lago as the Secretary General of the IAU signing the Memorandum of Understanding that created this new office. So this, if you will, is the very recent kickoff of our activities. So let's talk a little bit about OAE at Haus der Astronomie. Here you have the current team. There is me. There is my Deputy Director, Caroline Liefke. We currently have 3 coordinators who all come from astronomy. So Markus from Germany, who is a former Herschel Space Telescope scientist. Neil Deacon from Scotland, who used to do research on brown dwarfs. Carlos Munoz used to be an ESO staff astronomer at the Very Large Telescope in Chile until he joined us. And we also have Gwen Sanderson, who is of Venezuelan Welsh extraction, who's joining us as an assistant with lots of experience in organizing event. And there you have Haus der Astronomie. As Rosa already mentioned, we are a galaxy-shaped building. There you can see that building. There's also some telescopes in the back that belong to the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy. And of course, the new office is going to be supported by all of Haus der Astronomie staff. A bit of advertising. If you are active in astronomy education research, That's astronomy education research, not astronomy research. We're currently offering a 5-year postdoc in the context of the Office of Astronomy for Education. The deadline is soon, so August 26th. I've here included a link. So if you would like to join us in that capacity, then please apply. A little bit more about the organizational background. So Haus der Astronomie is a center dedicated to astronomy education and outreach. It is operated by the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy for the Max Planck Society. So the Max Planck Society is Germany's largest organization for basic research. And the reason that we were able to really create the Office of Astronomy for Education is that we had a number of external funding bodies supporting the OAE. Those are the Klaus Tschira Foundation, which was founded by one of the co-founders of the SAP software company, the Carl Zeiss Foundation, and the name Zeiss, of course, is one that is familiar to every astronomer, and also the Shaw Prize Foundation, which provides the money for those Shaw IAU workshops on astronomy education. So this is, if you will, on those two pages with the personnel, the administration, and the support. That is how the core office is organized. Then there will be OAE centers and OAE nodes. So what are those? Whenever an institution is willing to marshal their own resources, both in terms of personnel and also in terms of budget or funding for the task, they are invited to become either an OAE center or an OAE node. The difference is one of scale. We are currently in the process of establishing a total of 7 centers and nodes. So centers in Italy, China, India, Cyprus, and nodes in France, in the Republic of Korea, and in Nepal. And it's important to note that these are not regional offices. Their responsibility does not just extend to a specific region, but those are all part of this international effort, of this international mission of the OAE worldwide. And of course, they're going to utilize their specific regional knowledge, but they're really all part of this international group trying to fulfill the mission that I outlined earlier on. Then there's something that those of you who are familiar with the Office of Astronomy Outreach will already know, where the Office of Astronomy Outreach has its national outreach coordinators. And Rosa briefly mentioned that I am not the German National Outreach Coordinator anymore. I passed that job to somebody else, but I used to be the National Outreach Coordinator for Germany. Here, for the Office of Astronomy for Education, we have what we call the NAEC teams, National Astronomy Education Coordinators. Those are groups of volunteers, either from the astronomy community or from the teaching community or from the wider education amateur astronomy community, who are the liaison between the OAE and each country's education community. That goes really both ways. So of course we ask the NAECs to disseminate whatever existing material we might already have, but the NAECs are also the ones that we ask for nation-specific needs, because it is clear that there's some universality in astronomy given our common topic or common subject, but there's also very specific needs when it comes to teaching astronomy in the many different national contexts that teaching is taking place in. The early task that we've just started will be a survey of national practices and also of the status quo in astronomy education. That is something that is going to be presented at the second IAU Shaw workshop that I already mentioned. And eventually, of course, for each country, we will also have to think about ways of supporting the NAECs for lobbying for the inclusion of astronomy in curricula. This here is the current state of our NAEC teams. Every green or light green, we have confirmed National Astronomy Education Coordinator teams. We have nominations from those areas marked in yellow, and If you are associated with any country that is currently gray on this map, then if you're called National Committee for Astronomy, that is part of the IAU, and you're interested in joining us as the National Astronomy Education Coordinators, then you should contact your country's National Committee for Astronomy. If you do not have such a committee, you can contact us directly. If you would not know how to go about contacting your National Committee for Astronomy, contact us directly anyway. But again, if you represent any of those gray countries, and if either yourself or somebody you know might be interested in joining this team of National Astronomy Education Coordinators as a volunteer, then please pass the information on and please contact us. So currently, of course, the numbers are sort of changing a little bit by the day, but we are on the order of magnitude of 200 confirmed NAECs from a total of 70 countries. So we're not quite there yet, but we have made some encouraging progress. And that is really the last slide of my overview. So the question is, OAE and you, is that something that goes together? We're always happy, and we're relying on volunteer contributions for the OAE review boards. Again, our plan is to establish a community of knowledgeable astronomy education reviewers. That is also, of course, being a volunteer service effort. If you're interested in joining us for a Wikipedia editathon, that is, of course, a volunteer effort, as are the volunteer translators. So there are many different possibilities of helping the OAE. Eventually, of course, we hope that it goes both ways, and that the resources that we aim to create, notably the OAE reviews, will come in handy in your own astronomy education activities. If you're an institution that is interested in international collaboration in the area of astronomy education, then you might be interested in hosting an OAE center or OAE node. Again, something to contact us about. And of course, eventually there will come the point where we want to find a community consensus on certain matters of standards, for resources, for training events. And that is, of course, something where we count on the astronomy education community to join us in a representative fashion, because a consensus really needs to be a consensus. And the last thing that you can do for the OAE is to keep doing what you're doing, because evidently the OAE is just some structure that comes on top, if you will, or that has certain service tasks within the community. But what the community is really about is you who are doing astronomy education, whether as teachers or astronomers and as educators. And that's, of course, the most important thing in this context, that the community remain vibrant. So I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm going to be so bold and see if the video can, cutting my audio. I've given you some links again for more information. astroedu.org. I'm actually not sure if the www should be there. That's our website, of course, and then again, find us both on Twitter and on Facebook. And yeah, we've started an interesting adventure here, and we hope for your support, as we hope to support you in some fashion. All right, so
Markus, thank you very much. This was a lot for people to take in. I think it's a very ambitious mission that you are setting up to the office, and a lot to be done. And for sure, if we want the effort to reach out to students in the end, which are the main target users of this, we do need to count with these people that are here supporting and accompanying us in this adventure. We have a few questions here in the Q&A. So Jacob Brown is asking, I'm seeing a lot of resources mentioned in this talk or goals that IAU have for astronomy education resources. Is there a website that go with the resources, or a place to keep up with the progress that IAU has been working on this? I think you already answered, but maybe reconfirming this wouldn't harm.
Yes, so we're gathering all of this on the website that is currently on display here as true for the website of the Haus der Astronomie, of Haus der Astronomie website, but which is soon going to move to its own domain. So to be very transparent in it's here up there as well, and we're trying to keep all the documents that show that's visible to the whole of the community.
The next one, I think it's a mistake in the perception. So Paulo Lem is asking, Dr. Pössel, you mentioned a collection of images animation available at IAU. Is there a database available to access this collection? If so, would you give a link, please? So I guess you mentioned that there will be, right?
Yes, and this is something that we're just starting to do. And again, when it comes to not reinventing wheels, we hope that most of these images, precisely because they are under Creative Commons license, can end up on Wikimedia Commons as well. So again, we try to put the most important thing is not for those to be a website, which they eventually will be. What we can find, so Wikimedia Commons, where Wikipedia stores its pictures, is certainly our target storage there. So again, we are hoping to be a little bit in the background, but maybe if you in a year or so find an image on Wikipedia that you say, oh, this is very efforts, then maybe the OAE will have been behind it in some way.
There's a question that I will answer from Jacob as well. That all these presentations are being recorded, although they are being broadcasted live on Facebook. We're also recording all the sessions, and they will be uploaded to the GTTP Jihu or Jihu GTTP YouTube channel. So they will be available, and everyone who has registered for this conference will be reminded that when all the presentations are available there. We also have a question from Hayan Khan. I want to make my school as OAE Node. How can I apply?
All right, so we haven't had a school yet as a node. So a school would really, if a school wants to become a node, then you would really need to talk, first of all, talk to the director to see if you can dedicate something like one full position to this task. And we know that this is some problem to do, but if your school is willing to make that investment to really have one full person or a combination of half positions, so it just has to add up to about one to a node, then look on our website, contact us, let's talk about possibly establishing a node there, but it will require some commitment in terms of resources. It's really about helping us get the work done, and that can only be done if we have resources in each node.
We have a question from William Waller. What is the NAEC status in the United States?
All right, so the United States are one of the countries that, of course, does have a National Committee for Astronomy. We are currently hoping and also poking a little bit this National Committee for Astronomy to give us names for the NAECs for the United States. So I don't know what the last current state is here, but of course we are hoping to hear from them soon with the nominations for the National Astronomy Education coordinators, because if you can, it's currently a rather big gray area.
Another very interesting question is from Azen Khan. How can we get this effort moving in the rural parts?
Yeah, that's one of the central questions, and also one question where we collaborate more closely with our colleagues from the Office of Astronomy for Development. As far as support in terms of resources goes, that is a problem that we have solved. It is very clear that at least one OAE review should address the question of low-tech improvisational astronomy teaching. How do you teach astronomy, for instance, if you do not have the the resources, the advanced telescopes. So there's a lot of things that can do in that context as well. How to disseminate the material in those areas where the internet connection is bad is, of course, a particularly hard challenge. That is something that we are going to face, but where we have no solution as of yet. But I think that we're definitely going to work on.
And the last question is, how can individual educators help in this case?
Yes, so I mean, this comes back a little bit to my last slides. So if you're an educator, then again, the most important thing that you're doing when you're teaching astronomy is already what you're doing at this point, because that is what it comes down to, is what read the students. And then I've mentioned a little bit that there's other possibilities for volunteering. One of them is that if we really manage to create a community, people are familiar and comfortable with reviewing each other's content. And again, that is something where we need to create a culture that can do that, and a culture that we hope that will eventually benefit all of us who create such resources. That is definitely something where we can use all of this. Again, something like translations, that's going to be, I think, one of the main efforts in terms of resources, trying to get at least the basic fundamental resources translated into different languages. So those would be the areas that immediately come to mind.
Thank you very much, Markus. I think that was amazing. We still have a few minutes. We are keeping the schedule because we know that some people are going to connect with us specifically to see some presentations. So I take this opportunity to ask one question. What do you see is the relation between the Office of Astronomy for Education and the Commission for Education that you presented? So what will be the division of work? It's very important not to replicate the work among both, right?
Yes. So this was why I included this as a slide early on. The Commission is really the body that's the self-organizing body of the scientists, of the educators who are active in that area. And number of the astronomy is a matter of a volunteer effort, as something that they have built in their own institutions, where they have fought for acceptance in their own institutions. It's also something we cannot duplicate. This responsibility will remain within the science and education community. So, and if you look at the tasks that we have set ourselves for the Office of Astronomy for Education, firstly, while we are focusing on the service aspect, we are focusing on those tasks that a volunteer is asked to undertake on their own. We are focusing on those tasks where really having resources to bring to bear on those tasks makes a difference. There's some things that you just should ask volunteers to do. You can ask an office to do that has the resources. So that was precisely why we chose our specific goals that I've described as we did, because we believe that what we are doing there is going to be best to be complementary efforts that come from the scientific community itself. So that is indeed a main point, and that is why I occasionally also talk to Paul to make sure that we remain structures that are, of course, somewhat in parallel, but that have different foci, that have different characteristics, and together in a complementary way, if we want to get the best from the education.
Meanwhile, 3 more questions appeared. One is, upon application, if the members of the NAEC nominated is not a member of an organization in the corresponding country, will it have a bad impact on selection?
No, not at all. So the NAECs, the nominated NAECs, really meant to be people who have the network within their country, who have experience with astronomy education, who can really be the liaison to the between the education community. And if the national member institution, for instance, the Academy of Science, then we are unlikely, of course, to find those people within the Academy of Science unless they have a really strong education department. So, so no, being a member of the national member institutions is not a requirement at all.
Another question is if there is an IAC in Nepal, if there's already an IAC in Nepal.
That is, of course, something that I do not know. I'll give that answer later on in text.
And the last one, and I think is the last one that we can take, is I am a tuition teacher and one of my students is quite interested. So how can I show him what we can explore from home itself?
I would like to point that teacher and student to the existing resources from Global Hands-on Universe.
Well, it's not only Global Hands-on Universe, it's there are other very valuable tools and resources. And I think one of the important missions of the OAE will be to gather all these resources and to, I mean, if I am a teacher and I need to use some astronomy research, I know the hub where I have to go to.
That is true. So, so that is in fact, so eventually my answer would hopefully, here is the OAE review on daytime, or is the OAE review on remote observations. And then of course, within those reviews, all of the organizations and projects that form part of this conference now and beyond. So yes, that is true. That is hopefully going to be the answer once we have those OAE reviews.
For the time being, just keep tuned this week, and by the end of the week, you are going to have so many things that you will not know where to start, because we have been blessed with some of the most amazing people producing, using, repurposing, and training and teaching tools and resources of astronomy education in the planet. So you are well accompanied here. Just keep tuned. Towards the end of the week, we are going to present to you some networking tools, like we're going to create a WhatsApp group. We are going to direct you to some already existing groups where you can exchange information, and you can find some of the colleagues that you have here. You have some champion teachers, colleagues here. You have teachers here that are starting their ride with us. So you are in the right place for this. One of the characteristics of GHU and GTTP is that when you encounter us for the first time, it's just the first time. There's going to be plenty of other opportunities to continue the journey with us, and you will not be alone. Markus, thank you very much. It was a very, very complete talk, and a lot for us to take in, digest, and you put the monkey on our shoulders, that we need to help you so that your mission will be fully accomplished. So congratulations on the office, and we will for sure hear more soon.
Thank you for having me.